Hello, Frida, Reba, Darcy, and Patricia O'Connor here. And my, oh my, out of all the things in the world to be right about, it is a second day of a trillion-degree heat. Maybe not literally, but according to the local heat index, it's supposed to be like 80 degrees. And when I was out and about earlier, I would say that wasn't too far off. However, I live on the 4th floor. Heat has a funny thing. It rises. Up here, it's probably 87 or 90 degrees. And the heat just rolls out of this apartment on its way out to the cooler outdoors. And by cooler, I mean probably, 83, 84 probably in actuality. I know a lot of people thought the same way because the pool was quite active for some time. But it's nice now. You don't hear all the people trying to escape the heat. All you hear is the ducks laughing at us. And I had a couple of questions earlier. Well, actually, I had somebody talking to me about nutrients. And while I was on that topic, I was at a site, I believe might have been No Rules Bonsai. I'm not sure now. It was a Facebook page. And somebody was talking about Wisteria blooming and not blooming. And I thought it would be a good time to pick up. This was how I got back into bonsai after being away for many, many years. I decided to decorate my balcony, and so I bought that antique day bed so I could put it there and watch the stars, and I lined that with planters, and then I planted wisteria and jasmine and honeysuckle, and I was gonna make that a little Buddha oasis all to my own. Couple of things about that I hadn't counted on. One, it was taking a long time for the wisteria and jasmine to get going, coming out in between the lattice on the rail. And two, when it did, the landlord said no, get rid of that. And that's when I first started figuring out that I was going to have to go to more trouble to work with these guys than I thought. So later, when they saw that I was into bonsai, I was kind of protective of it. And they were like, no, breathe easy. We're into your bonsai as much as you are. Just put trays underneath them. So that's kind of what led to all this. In other words, was me having this white wisteria clone. If I remember correctly, I ordered this out of season. And because I got it out of season, the one place that would still ship me one was Target. Now, that's what struck me as odd because we don't have a garden center for say at our local Target. Not anything that would have a plant. What we have is an aisle that goes away come fall. And they start selling other stuff that is absolutely, you walk back to the garden, what was the garden center, and you go, oh, well, it's gone now for this. So anyway, I got this guy on Target, so I can't really say that this guy has any, all out heritage or attempt or anything. And I got a couple of them, and it was the one left over, and it was, what am I going to do with this leftover with Japanese wisteria, white? And that's where I ended up going to Facebook because as a 17-year-old growing up in Southeast Texas, we had a house out in the sticks. And I would dig up oak trees and hollies and not many pines because all of our pines were like loblollies and they had enormously long needles at birth, and it didn't strike me as ever looking very bonsai-like. In the swampy part of Texas where I grew up in, there wasn't a lot of potential for Yamadori out there. that I was aware of. So anyway, long story short, I did have a couple of books, and this was in the mid-70s, and one of them was from Peter Chan of Heron's Bonsai in England. And so whenever I went back to YouTube and I typed in Wisteria bonsai tree, it was the most innocent thing in the world. I had no idea what was about to happen, but I pushed enter and fell down the rabbit hole. When the sun came up the next morning, I was probably on my 80th bonsai video and was well and truly hooked. By the time the week was over, I had bought the little turntable that Wisteria is now sitting on, and a couple of tools, and was watching everything I could possibly find. Because as a teenager, when I got into this before, it was before internet. It was before computers. Hell, it was almost before television. So that was just like, oh yeah, bonsai trees plus unlimited bad information on the interweb. Wow, let me just dive into that. So I did, and dive we did. And I gotta say, I picked a good one. I think I said in my last video that I'm really not one to go starting planting things from seed as a rule. But I didn't really see myself shelling out for somebody else's established Wisteria. And I did already have this clone sitting here not doing anything. And I did happen to know that it was white, which is hard to find. Where I grew up in Southeast Texas, you would see white and purple, sometimes together out in the woods, like maybe some plantation where they had a mixture of them had fallen, and then the stuff just took over. I remember one scene in Beaumont, Texas, driving just outside of town. There was miles and miles and miles in the pine trees of purple wisteria, only to have it turn white for a couple of miles. And never knew the backstory on that, but it sure was interesting. This is Japanese wisteria, and it did bloom this past spring. And the reason it bloomed is because it was, as a cutting, it was taken from a blooming plant. And that's the key, one of the keys, to get a wisteria to bloom. Another trick is, and I kind of got away with this one because of something else that I had done, which I didn't know was going to be beneficial for that, but I'll explain as I go. When this bloomed this past spring, it was absolutely beautiful. I thought that it would be pretty nice. You know, I mean, sometimes you see skinny little bonsai trees, maybe kind of looking a little waspy or whatever, and that's a pretty style too. But I was really thinking that this was going to be something when it actually got a little girth to it. So I planted it at the time in an oversized oval pot, which has since then met its demise. So I just turned to, I just went to one of the bonsai box stores and ordered a $12 Japanese cream white round pot. And I actually am really happy with it. The one thing that shows it to be, we'll do a little test to display our flaws, is I think there's a mold mark in it. Yeah, right here. It's got a mold mark in it that you can see in person. And that kind of gives it away as another one there, right? So, so somebody made this pot using the same handcrafting ceramic method that you would have used at summer camp to make that little ceramic figurine that you then hand painted. Anyway, I digress. So one thing I did right as far as getting this thing to bloom is I went back and looked at my notes. They do not, if you want one to bloom, low on the nitrogen. So when you're going to pick out your nutrients, go with some, and you're looking at those three numbers on the front. go with a single digit or a 0 on the nitrogen. And you can bump up the phosphorus, I believe, but you need to reduce the nitrogen on that. Which I happen to know other plants that whenever they start getting yellow leaves like that at the end of the year, if you want to like if they turn, but you would like for them to stay green a little longer, one trick was to give them nitrogen. So probably the lack of wanting nitrogen for a blooming plant is why they always seem is I'm just going to put the two together and say that's likely a reason, you know. And they also yellow this time of year, so that's exactly what you would expect. So if you want your guy to bloom, don't start one from seed. I said the other day they can be 20 years away from blooming. I went back and checked my sources. There are other sources that say at least 10 years. So it's possible that you could start one from seed and plant it out in the yard and then forget about it for a minute and turn around and 10 years have gone by and you go, wow, it's blooming already. But just know that if you're wanting to do it for the pride of saying that you started it from seed, and if you're okay with that, then that's okay. But if you want to see it bloom, go with a clone. Go with a clone and make sure it's a clone from a blooming tree. If not, go get nursery stock at the time of year when they're blooming and actually get one that is in bloom, so you won't just be taking somebody's word for it when they could be wrong or they could be mistaken, or sometimes trees get mixed up. You know, I bought a white wisteria, was really happy to get one. What if it would have turned out to be purple? You know, accidents happen all the time. So that's what's that. Also, one thing that will help it is in late summer, prune it back. Get rid of those long shoots that it makes, those tendrils. Cut those back. It will use a lot of energy keeping those happy and healthy and doing stuff with that between then and fall. If you just get rid of them, it'll revert all that energy to making more bud sites for the tree. And one thing they recommend for outdoors, and I'm going to relate this back to the thing that I accidentally did right earlier. They say that if you have one of these in the ground, and when they're talking about the nitrogen, don't put nitrogen in it. Well, you're also going to be looking at the leaf mold and stuff on the ground. And so what they say is to walk around the perimeter of it. And I didn't really get a whole lot into that, but just stab the shovel in the ground in a circle around the tree. I would assume that's a foot or two away from the tree. What they want you to do is prune back the roots under the ground of a tree that's in the ground. And I assume that pruning helps it to cut back the nitrogen in some way. Those are just garden tips from a really elderly Southern lady who had tips on how to make your wisteria bloom. Now, one thing I did wrong on some of the other trees earlier was I had put those cookie tins, which I had used as trip trays under my trees, and as much problems as that caused me on quite a few of my trees, one place that it was welcome was the Wisterias. The Wisterias were fine. You can even still see a little bit of the water mark up to here, where at times the little pie tin that they were in would get kind of deep. So what that does is people will tell you that not only can you not the rumor is that it's hard to overwater a wisteria. In fact, in the summer when they drink so much, you can even set the pots down and let an inch or two of the bottom rest in water so that you're sure that it not only is it not running dry, but when you listen to the horticulturist who actually knows why that's beneficial, they will use the word cell pruning. So what's happening is the bottom little bit of the root mass is rotting away, causing new feeder roots to take their place. So by letting it sit in standing water, you're constantly replacing those bottom root tips, and that's what they mean by cell pruning. I've also heard people use that tip as far as getting their wisterias to bloom. Now, I happen to think that the overwater here wisteria is a myth, and also Peter on YouTube fame said that he thought it was a myth about being able to grow your trees in water. I believe whenever I see a lot of his wisterias, he's still using potting soil, which is water retention soil. And I nearly killed this very tree by putting it in what I thought was some really, really nice, a lot of peat in it, a lot of, going to hold a lot of moisture really well. I don't have to water it and turn around and worry about it on a hot day. And so during the day when I would water the trees that needed water, and every day I would look at this and go, it doesn't need water, it doesn't need water. And it would just go a long time without needing water because of the soil that it was in. And then white flies started moving into the neighborhood. And after a while, I found that the combination of using a bonsai pot, which is small, and a water retaining soil like that black peat based stuff, very nearly caused me to kill this very tree. Now, another bonsai grade who I'd gotten stolen a lot of tips from had said there's no such thing as an emergency repot. Usually what you're looking at is a situation where you need to do something different with your watering to regulate the situation that you're in, and that it never really actually necessitate the quote-unquote emergency repot. And I would say I agree with that. However, it hadn't been in that pot for 2 months, and it was nearly dead. And if I looked at my calendar, it was going to be in that pot for 2 years before it was supposed to get another repot. And I was too lazy to hold its hand for 2 years and try not to, and just to walk on eggshells, try not to. So I yanked it up out of that, poured akadama in there, replanted it. It never skipped a beat. I'm really careful when I can transplant things a lot of times. I had a lot of experience in the past with transplanting plants that you needed to keep growing up in containers when they got a certain size. And they would also were finicky about going into shock. So I got pretty good at slip potting things without them hardly knowing what was going on. And I wouldn't say this was exactly that, but the plant was very appreciative. As soon as I put it in the akadama, the next day it was ready to water, and the next day after that it was ready to water, and it has been rewarding me ever since. Now, I had forgotten about the nitrogen, so I probably gave all of my wisterias at one time or another some fertilizer that was a little higher in the nitrogen, but the part where I left it on the front and it got full sun all day, and the part where it stayed in the pie dish and got its feet wet and its roots pruned, probably countered the nitrogen I gave it. So that would likely be the reason why this little beauty bloomed for me, and the others didn't. And they are two that I have. Like you can see, that one is it's slanted, planted in a slant style forward. And I took two of those and planted them both in two different directions, and then wired the bases together below the soil line to get a fusion. And that's the one that I'm saying hasn't bloomed for me yet. But now that I think I've figured out why, maybe we can fix that this spring. But as far as it being a bonsai tree, because it had a little training or a little wire on it at one point, and it's in akadama soil, and it's in a bonsai pot. I wouldn't say all that, but it's certainly not a topiary. In other words, it's not proportionate the way that people tend to cut topiaries, some sort of, make it look like a cube or a barbell or whatever. but the part where it blooms, it absolutely makes it easy to keep it in your bonsai collection. Is it my oldest tree? No, I've got a tree on there that was supposed to be, that's reportedly 150 years old. I've got one that's been counted as a 75-year-old tree, but I also have some trees that I absolutely love that are less than 4 years old. And this is one of those. And I wouldn't say it's a topiary, and I almost wouldn't say it's a pre-bonsai either, because it's, you know, given all else, it's probably in the pot that it'll be in for a while. It's probably the shape that it'll be in for a while. I probably, because of the way the cutback does on that every spring, I probably won't put a whole lot of wire to that, but we will get the blooms. And because I live in an apartment, I don't have the space that I could normally dedicate to having a bread basket full of moss with a whole bunch of trident maple seedlings growing, and I don't have a space where I can have a bunch of things in little milk jugs or milk cartons or things that you can bring along. You know, this is supposed to be my space, and when the winter comes along and everything dies back, it still needs to look like a home, an inviting home. So I have to be careful with how I bring things along. It doesn't have to be a ready-made bonsai tree to be in my collection, but I need to be able to enjoy it on its own merit without it being a million years old. And I really, in the end, think that that's also kind of what it's all about. When the tree that I'm so smitten right now, when I'm talking about that ponderosa and how much I love it, that when I read the part where it was 150 years old, that did nothing to my blood pressure. When I was reading about this tree, I was already smitten and knew that if it were possible that I would be reeling that thing in. And I don't love it any more or any less for it being 51.50 or 50 cents. You know, you like your trees for their own merit. For instance, had you bought a tree from someone and you brought it home and were telling everybody how something about this tree that you absolutely thought was the neatest thing since sliced bread, what if you found out that wasn't true? Would you then not like the tree? That would be a shame, because hopefully you loved it on its own merit. So that is a little bit of the reason behind me not doing videos on how to get a big fat daddy trunk by planting something in that sunny little out of the way spot in the backyard that nobody notices, or setting all those planters up on some sawhorses in the backyard behind the garage so that you can have all of those containers that are waiting to be beautiful things someday. My stuff needs to be able to be able to be looked at and enjoyed without bringing down the appearance of the place. And I'm not saying we're all that like Shangri-La or nothing. Frankly, I had the place nicely decorated before bonsai addiction hit its holes. But you know what else? I get bored quick. I made it really, really, really nice, and there wasn't a lot of room to grow from there. And when I got bored with it, it's like, yeah, I need to rip all of this out of here to make room for bonsai trees. And this is going to improve with time as I figure out new ways to move and wrangle. But between now and then, I'm really enjoying the tree aspect of this in all of its forms. And what I was looking at on the wisteria trees yesterday had me wondering about why the one had bloomed and the one didn't. And then I remembered that that was the tree that actually, in the beginning, got me back into bonsai. Like, what do you do with an extra white wisteria clone in an apartment building? And here we are. It's funny how things work out. So, I think I was saying earlier, out of all the things in the world to be right about, I had said that traditionally, for the last 15, 18 years or so that I've been in the Bay Area, October is a hot, hot, hot month. And here it is, October 2nd, and it is probably still, 80 some odd degrees up here with the windows open. But yeah, I know, we'll live. Yeah. So that's got us. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe, and enjoy your weekend. This is really going to be something.